Hello, everybody. This is Ziya with the Madison Company here again. Today we're changing venues. We're in Tokyo, Japan right now, and I'm here on a business trip, and I thought it would be a great opportunity to talk to Zane Inglis, who is the Managing Director of Sales Institute Japan, which is a sister company of the Madison Company, and just have a conversation with him regarding some of the elements of selling in Japan, as well as overall selling activities. Zane has a lot of experience in selling in Japan, as also outside of Japan also. But I'd like to get his opinion on specifically things. One thing that I've always been curious about is everybody talks about selling being important relationships, and again here in Japan, relationships, as we all know, are very, very important. But Zane, tell me, what do you think about relationship and how it works into the selling cycle here in Japan or in general? I mean, if you can, just explain that a little bit, and let's have a dialogue about that.
Thanks, Ziya, and welcome everyone who's listening. I guess one of the first things that comes to mind is when you talk about selling in Japan, everyone seems to think that it's all about relationships, probably more so than Western companies, Western countries I've been to. In some cases, it's seen as 100% of the process. But for me personally, I think focusing 100% on the relationship side of things becomes very risky for a number of reasons. It's very difficult to show progress and outcome through a relationship-based sales process.
Yeah, I think as you're saying, that relationship sometimes takes an overwhelming portion. Everybody says, well, if you're a salesman and then you have a good relationship with a customer, it's all going to be sales. You're saying that that's not the situation. It's not all relationship.
No, whenever you visit a customer, if you don't have any kind of preconceived goal or objective for the call, you'll have no idea whether you've progressed within the sales process, whether you've shown benefit to the customer, whether you've received benefit yourself. So that in the end can start to cost both of you money.
That's right. And I mean, it's interesting you say that, because I've worked in Japan for a long time also, and in different markets around the world, and relationships are a very, very important part of it. But as you say, without the other elements within the relationship supporting it, it really doesn't really just hold water, if you want to call it. I mean, you need to have other elements beside it. What other elements do you think are absolutely necessary here in Japan that would really, really help a salesperson achieve their numbers?
I guess for me, the biggest thing that I've seen experienced people benefit from in the field from our coaching is pre-call planning. I'm setting those clear black and white objectives of what they need to achieve out of the call. And sometimes that's quite difficult for an experienced salesperson who bases things on relationships, because they feel if they start to use specific selling skills, the customer's going to feel like they've been sold to. But the reality is they know this guy's a salesperson, so he's coming there to sell.
But you see, that's a funny thing. I mean, we think about that, and you mentioned that it's valid here in Japan, but the reality is it's valid everywhere in the world. I mean, it's the basics of selling. I mean, if we talk about the preparation, or if you're talking about all the other elements within, relationships are the underlying factor, absolutely. But there's other elements within it, and that's the same in different parts of the world also, especially in the United States. How about selling skills themselves, as far as opening, closing, handling objections? Where does that play?
Probably one of the largest weaknesses I see is two-way communication, asking various questions, different types of questions, leading with an open question, following it up with a second and third level question. It may be an existing customer, but that gives you an opportunity to get their voice of customer, a recent term that's being bandied around, which means you understand why they're comfortable using your product or service and what benefits they see. So when you go into another customer who perhaps doesn't really buy into the product as much, they'll always believe direct examples given from a customer within the same industry, as opposed to your own promotional materials, which are designed to influence them. So that's one of the key factors, is asking questions and letting the customer answer.
Yeah, two-way communication, and we as salespeople, whenever we have a dialogue, we always compete for talking time. He talks too much, I talk too much. But if there's a customer, we have to, if we're on a joint sales call, we try to always keep that to a minimum so that we can understand what the customer is talking. And we're talking about a two-way communication of trying to listen. We were having lunch today, and we were talking about one of the things was there was a situation where a salesperson, he was out in the field, and listening to a salesperson pitch a customer. And the interesting thing is there was 3 or 4 or 5, according to Zane, close signals that were out there. The salesperson finally closed it after about the 6th time. Finally at the very end. But then after the call was over, Zane asked him, "How come you didn't close earlier? You had about 4 or 5 signals." And the salesperson says, "Oh, really? I had that?" Again, the reality is we as salespeople don't listen as much, and I don't think it's any different here in Japan. I think, and anywhere else also.
I think one of the funniest things I've heard recently is a sales rep giving me an example that the reason I talk so much is I don't want to allow them an opportunity to say no.
How many times have we heard that before? Right?
My argument to him was, in some cases, I want the customer to tell me no, as long as they tell me why.
Yeah.
That gives me an opportunity to suggest an option which will fix that problem. But if we never hear what they're really worried about,
that's right.
How can we possibly close?
But that's the whole point. That's a selling skill, and salespeople need to develop that selling skill. Not only the hardening of your outer shell of hearing no and saying, "Okay, now what am I going to do next?" But how do you turn around the no and asking questions, handling objections, handling the rejections, and then moving on to that, and moving beyond just it's a relationship selling. So it's important to have these type of skills here in Japan also, as in different parts of the world. So in essence, the other thing I believe it's absolutely necessary in selling is you have to record. You have to have summary of the calls. You have to have an information on the customer, and that's the same thing here. I would expect.
Yeah, it's interesting that we talk about relationships. I often visit actually into the field with our customers, the managers and the sales reps, who may have a very strong existing relationship with a company, or in many cases a hospital, because we deal a lot with medical companies, but they may bring out a new product into a different line that the target doctor or the target customer may be the same, but this is something completely new to the relationship, that they think they have this rapport, but when they start to introduce the new product, the doctor or the customer says, "Look, I have no problem with the existing product I have. Why should I change?" Then comes the objection handling.
That's right.
They have a relationship, but they don't know how to handle the objections.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it's very, very similar whether you're in Australia, whether you're in the U.S., whether you're in Germany, or whether you're in Japan or China. You have to have a relationship. You do have to have that basis to start to, whether you're going to have new accounts, so you're going to have to start building the relationship or maintaining a relationship, which is just as difficult as getting a new account. So the relationship, I would say, is probably about 30%, maybe 20, 30, 40% of the whole selling cycle or the selling methodology. But you also need to supplement that. That's the right word. Supplement that with planning, preparation, targeting. These are some basic things that the salesperson needs to do. Selling skills, whether they be opening a call or closing the call, handling objections, and also at the same time you have to record something. You have to make sure that you have that information, because as humans we're going to forget. We're going to forget probably 60-70% of what's been said 2-3 weeks down the road. So these are some just basics that are very, very important whether you're in Japan or in other parts of the world. So anyway, Zane, thanks for your inputs, and I think you'd agree with what I just said, right?
Most definitely.
Most definitely. Anyway, but systems and relationships and the structure, the fundamentals. I keep talking about that quite often, but I think those are very, very important. So stick with those. Make sure you're an expert when it becomes developing your relationship, and also developing the structure and also some of the selling skills that you need to make sure that the selling, the methodology that you're doing, so you're achieving better sales. Anyway, that's it for today. This is Ziya Mohamedjani with Zane Inglis. And if you do have any comments, if you have any questions, stay on with the end of the video. We have all the information there. But thanks for listening, and we'll talk again soon. Bye now.
Thank you.